In 1876, Los Angeles became the end of the line for the Transcontinental Railroad. Thousands of men, many displaced veterans of the Civil War, began to ride the rails, stowed away in empty boxcars and jumping trains. These hobos survived by handouts from the religious and charitable organizations. The place where they congregated was called Hobo Corner. At the turn of the century, First and Los Angeles streets were legendary. It was one of the toughest hangouts in the West. It became infested with alcoholics, mental illness, and violence. Society deemed these people as scums and dirty pigs. The Union Rescue Mission and the Salvation Army were all located there until they tore it down to build City Hall. During the Depression in the 1930s, many farmers and workers left their families, seeking work in Los Angeles. Many became alcoholics, ending up there. The social services began to evolve into social centers. During World War II and Vietnam, a lot of servicemen ended up there because it became their havens during their journeys. Most were addicts from PTSD, and Skid Row was a place to get their drugs and alcohol as well as escape rejection. From the 1960s to the 1970s, 22,750 hotel rooms were closed down because they did not meet fire and safety codes. In 1975, the city put all of its money into redeveloping this area. Because of this, surrounding communities were underfunded and sent their homeless to Skid Row. In the late 70s, the EPA started closing down polluting factories. And with that, so went a lot of unskilled jobs. In Los Angeles County, Fire Station 9, which covers Skid Row, is the busiest firehouse in the nation, responding to 35,518 calls for service last year. The term Skid Row derives from Seattle, Washington, where skid roads were places where loggers slid their cut lumber to ports for shipment. By the 1930s, the term referred to rundown areas of cities characterized by bars, brothels, and a life originally tracked by loggers. It began to include the presence of homeless and extremely low-income populations. There are now over 2,500 nomads living in the streets of Skid Row, downtown LA. In December of 2017, a federal ban on the making of lethal viruses was lifted. Sometime in late December of 2019, there was a new form of coronavirus discovered in Wuhan, China. We were told it started in a fish market by people eating bats. At first, the Chinese told us not to worry about it. Then Dr. Fauci told us that there was nothing to worry about. And then the WHO told everyone not to worry because China said it wasn't contagious. In early January, Bill Gates and Barack Obama released a documentary called Pandemic on Netflix. In late January, India announced that the coronavirus had at least 4 protein inserts from HIV, which is a sign of engineering, leading them to believe it was an engineered bioweapon. At the same time, Charles Lieber, the head of Harvard's Chemistry and Chemical Biology, was arrested for lying about his ties to Wuhan University of Technology. I suspect he made the virus, but others think it was made at the University of North Carolina by grants approved by the Obama administration. At the end of January, President Trump shut down all flights coming from China. Dr. Fauci predicted 100,000 to 200,000 people in the United States would die of it and thought we should never shake hands again. In late February, one Harvard epidemiologist, Mark Lipsitz, said that 70% of the world's population would get it. Russia closed its border with China. China went on lockdown and imposed martial law on several major cities, Wuhan being one of them. On April 10th, Dr. Fauci lowered the prediction to 60,000 and said social distancing was working. He also said we should never shake hands again. He then said more lives could be saved if Trump had reacted earlier. This made Trump start a second team of experts rather than firing him. A few days later, an MIT PhD scientist named Dr. Shiva said that Dr. Fauci and Bill Gates want every person on the planet vaccinated by April 13, 2020. On April 15, Trump defunded the WHO, which Gates owns 15% of. On April 17, Dr. Rashid Buttar started releasing videos that said wearing masks was counterproductive. But he also showed a video of Dr. Fauci predicting in January 2017 that there would be a surprise outbreak during the Trump presidency. It was a simulation that showed 65 million killed by the coronavirus. People were being arrested for not wearing face masks. He explained how social distancing was absurd. He said he could get rid of the virus in 24 hours. On April 20th, hackers hacked into the WHO, Bill Gates, and a lab in Wuhan. They discovered that Dr. Fauci was funding the lab as well as Gates. On May 8th, the president of Tanzania tested the coronavirus test on a goat, a quarry bird, and a papaw fruit, and they came out positive. May 18th, Trump starts taking hydrochloroquine. It's a well-known cure that's cheap and has been out there for decades. If a patient gets COVID-19, the hospital gets $5,000. If they have pneumonia, they get $13,000. If they end up on a ventilator, they get $39,000. Because of this, hospitals in New York City were falsifying information. The mayor was demanding that everyone use ventilators. But in almost every case, the patients died. He also started sticking seniors infected with virus into senior homes, infecting and killing thousands. They were also ordered not to revive heart patients and people with Alzheimer's. There was amazing correlation between 5G cell towers in the areas that were being hardest hit. Then around May 28th, Italian doctors disobeyed the WHO and did autopsies. They discovered that it was bacterium and together with 5G produced inflammation and hypoxia. Once they discovered this, they gave their patients aspirin and a Pronox. Yesterday, the WHO finally admitted that the spread of COVID-19 by asymptomatic carriers was rare. At the same time, the CDC said the death rate was 0.4%. Yet those who have weak immune systems will fall as victims. We will do our best to help the nomads in Skid Row and elsewhere. My name is Kevin Davis. I was born in Phoenix, Arizona. When I was 5, I would go to church and learn the song called Jesus Loves the Little Children. The song talked about how Jesus loved all kids of all races. Then I would go into a mall and see a separate water fountain for blacks only. I was pretty confused. When I was 6, I was sent away to live with my grandparents in a small farming community in Nebraska. There were no minorities there. When I was 9, my mom remarried and I moved back with my family to Southgate, California. Our new stepfather was a racist and a bigot. We lived in Alameda Street. On the other side of the tracks was Watts. When I was 12, we moved a few blocks away to a neighborhood that was infested with drugs. And of course, this influenced me. I was the only Boy Scout in my neighborhood and almost an Eagle Scout. There were no blacks in grammar school. I was the president of the school when I was in 6th grade. When I got to junior high and high school, there was a third black, a third Hispanic, and a third white. For the most part, these groups remained separated. I went to college to study theater. I found this was a group of misfits and people that didn't belong. I studied lighting and scenery design. In 1983, I lived downtown LA for several months. The homeless population wasn't that bad, and we had a lot of homeless friends. In 1984, I started my first scenery and special effects shop. In 4 years, it grew to be one of the largest on the West Coast. Right before the union took me out, I was worth $2.5 million. It was a godsend because I had so much business, I was working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. To make this happen, I used cocaine. Had I continued this pace, I would have died of a heart attack. I stopped cocaine and then started a smaller shop downtown LA. One of my clients was working for the Super Bowl in Pasadena, and the NFL said we had to have a minority crew to be able to work on the job. I then put together a group of homeless workers and trained them. Most of these were black. To this day, this was the best crew I ever had. There were homeless people living behind my shop that would guard my shop at night. For a brief period of my career, I was the only white person that was working for BET, Black Entertainment Television. I was an art director and donated my time for such causes as Coalition for Free Africa, produced by Dick Griffey. In 1992, after the Rodney King riots, there was a movement to come up with an idea how to rebuild LA. My friend John Marshall and a few other black leaders came up with an idea to build a film school near USC for minorities. This became such a great idea that Vice President Gore was going to take a bus tour through South LA with John as well as a few prominent black figures. And then Maxine Waters claimed it was her idea. She parked a lady answering a phone in an office. The White House, seeing this as a turmoil, abandoned the idea and gave the money to the Missouri flood victims. In 1996, the director of the CIA came to a high school in LA for a town meeting. At that meeting, Michael Rupert, an ex-LAPD narcotics officer, confronted Don Juche and told him that he had seen the CIA's involvement in drug dealing in South LA. They were bringing crack cocaine into South LA and selling it at dirt cheap prices. Gary Webb picked up on this story and wrote about it in the Mercury News. Then Maxine Waters took her story to Congress. For Gary's involvement, he was whacked in the late 2004. In 2006, Michael moved to Venezuela fearing for his life. He then came back several years before he took his own life. He told everybody he was with a friend in Colorado, but he secretly was living with a friend in Calistoga, California. I was friends with Michael about a year before he took his life. He was pissed that Maxine Waters had taken his story to Congress and left him and Gary out to dry. He had been stripped of all of his benefits from the LAPD and was living on the charity of friends. He was afraid for his friend's life. 3 days before he shot himself in the head, he told us all what he was going to do. Not one of us tried to stop him. On April 13, 2014, Michael did the decent thing. I will never forget this hero. In early 2001, my girlfriend produced a radio show for Ted Hayes, the downtown LA homeless activist who built the Dome Village. The Dome Village consisted of 20 fiberglass domes where families could live. The money was donated by ARCO. The radio show we did was in Pasadena and very late at night. Only a few people from Dome Village would call in. I sat in a booth next to Ted and called in, disguising my voice in different accents. I asked vague questions so Ted could explain what was going on. At the time, Ted lived in Hollywood and had several girlfriends. His problem was that he was a Republican and thought George Bush Jr. would help him out. Ted said there were 12 NGOs that were downtown LA to help, and none of them were doing anything. In 2006, the property they were renting increased by 700%. LA had a chance at homelessness, but sold out to developers who made million-dollar lofts. In 2002, I met a teacher of spiritual teachers like Deepak Chopra and Michael Beckworth. Her name was Pamelia Evans. She used the term divine nomad to describe the homeless, and it stuck. In 2009, I went to the Amazon to help restore and save lives. I cleaned a major stream in the city of Pucallpa, Peru, and pulled out over 3,700 bags of trash. I fed nearly 1,200 kids and took about 100 to hospitals. I had a massive plan that I put together, and then in 2015, I had a brain aneurysm. While I was doing this, people kept asking me why I wasn't helping my own. When I first started going there, the homeless wasn't that big of an issue. Now it is.